know that every moment in the history of the species is one in which we are being tested in terms of what kind of human beings we are.
Dr. West, there are many issues that ultimately determine this election, but it does appear that, especially in a lot of the swing states, that immigration was a big issue. Yes. And one of the reasons that I personally believe that immigration is a big issue, and I tend to be considerably more conservative on this issue than Jen is that I think when you look at what has happened over the past few years, particularly with the railroad strike that got broken by Biden.
That's right.
The growth of what I believe is probably the best overall union we have right now in this country, which is the United Auto Workers Union, led by Shawn Fain. And then, of course, you look at the very bold move by Mr. O'Brien, head of the Teamsters Union, to speak at the RNC, is that labor is trying to get its sea legs right now. And because corporate oligarchy has taken over this country, the thought process of those in power, those that run the multinational corporations like the Walmarts and the Amazons of the world, is to have the lowest paid workers possible and break labor as effectively as possible. That will happen under Trump. We saw what happened when Elon gave all that money to Trump, and Trump went on stage and said, Elon's a great guy and Shawn Fain's a terrible person. And of course, he'll make a statement like that. But in effect, what he's saying is that no matter who's in charge, we will do what we have to do to crush labor. If you could talk about the importance of this post-election reassessment and the importance of the labor movement and how that intersects with immigration, I would love to hear we would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, one, I believe that a strong labor movement, and I tend to be in solidarity with the more militant wing of the labor movement, but I'm thoroughly convinced that it is organized workers with great courage and willingness to fight. That's a precondition of any serious talk of fundamental change in a capitalist society. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Not because Marx said it, but Marx did say it, but it's a fact. It really is. But as you and I know, the business unionism, the cowardly of certain union leaders and so forth, make it very difficult to convince people that the labor movement is as integral and essential as it really is. 6% now in the private sector and more in the public sector, but still so very important. I was blessed to talk to the brother who ran the Teamsters, as a candidate. We had a 2-hour conversation. It was rich. It was very rich. And I told him a part of my anti-poverty program was to eliminate all the right to work laws in the state. That is $27 for minimum wage and so forth. And they were right with me all the way. We had a wonderful dialogue. We really did. But of course, he's got to be practical. And at the same time, he's trying to pit one against the other. And he knows that Biden broke the railroad strike. And tell you the truth, even brother, the other Shawn, who when I had planned to go out to Detroit and walk the picket line, they called me up and said, "Could you put it off a day because Biden's now decided to walk the same line?" Yeah. I said, "Oh, how long is he going to stay? Is that going to reflect a serious shift in his policies?" And so forth. They said, "Well, could you hold it off for the next day?" So I just walked the line in New York, went upstate New York the same day. And then the next day I went to the same place there and right outside of Detroit. But you say to yourself, all of a sudden now this little symbolic gesture makes it like this is Eugene Debs come back from the dead. I said, "Oh, no, like Emma Goodman come back from the dead. No, this is electoral strategy and tactic. This man has been in the back pocket of the credit card industry in Delaware for the last decades."
Yeah.
Years.
He was there for 12 minutes. There was 12 minutes of Joe on the picket line. Yeah. And that's telling. I mean, I they're like, "Oh, but he went." I'm like,
yeah, no.
What's the point of going if you're going to break the railroad strike?
Break the rail. And even my dear brother Bernie fell for it and started telling everybody he's the strongest pro-union president since FDR and so. Please, he's got some significant legislation for infrastructure. Let's just tell the truth. But he's never been this pro-union, deep solidarity of working people. He's tied to the corporate elites the way 98% of the elected officials in the Democratic Party and Republican Party are. Let's just be honest about this thing.
He didn't push the PRO Act. I don't recall him getting in there and pushing that. He could have pushed the PRO Act. I mean,
exactly
did you blame the parliamentarian for that one, or was that she was just the fault of the minimum wage?
Well, and as I've said, you know, I tend to lean more conservative on a number of these issues. But I even said to Jen, I said, President Biden's administration was finished when he said the parliamentarian told me I can't pass a $15 minimum wage. In his first 100 days, I said, that's it, done, goodbye. And instead, what you couldn't even do what I believe is the more effective push when it comes to a true progressive policy. You know, obviously tuition-free public college was something that was heavily emphasized when Bernie was running. And of course, we will deal away with student debt the second we do have tuition-free public college. But to me, the emphasis needs to be on tuition-free trade schools. People need to be able to learn a skill and not have to go into debt in order to do that. You want to be an electrician, you want to know how to operate a rig, you want to be able to be a plumber. As far as I'm concerned, we need to be paying people to learn these jobs because they help our economy. And yet there is no encouragement in that direction. There were so many things that the Biden-Harris administration had the opportunity to do, and they did less than nothing. And that was before the genocide. The genocide was the creme a la creme. They just wanted to make sure that they left no doubt once they are about to leave office in 2.5 months that they were cataclysmic failures. And that is how Trump got back in again.
No, I think you're telling the truth there. And I would just even build on, I even ground what you say, because let's look at it from the chocolate side of town. That when it comes to the Black freedom movement, the labor movement has always been integral and essential because the masses of Black people have been not just workers, but workers on the lower rungs of the capitalist labor force. So any increase in wages has to do not just with access to resources, but also has a reflection of one's dignity and respect. Then in addition to that, if you're going to talk about student loans and you recognize the masses of Americans of all colors do not go to college. I tell my students all the time, I'm so glad you're here, but it's 46% of American youth, and for Black folks, around 20-some%. So no matter what happens in relation to student loans, it's not going to have the repercussions and ramifications of the larger society because the mass of folk never go to college. And for the professional managerial class, they can't believe it because most of them are in a silo. Everybody I know went to college. First question I asked, where'd you graduate? What'd you major in? What was it like freshman year? Hey, when I walked my neighborhood in Harlem, that's not the first question I asked my brother, what college he went to.
I find it also sort of akin to Kamala, part of her opportunity economy.
Yes.
That she kept talking about small business loans to Black men, as if all people want to own small businesses and run their own businesses. And if that should be the only way we should support people is if they want to own their own business. And how many people do that? Like, so many people are just happy to work and just want to be treated fairly and paid properly.
That's exactly.
But so small business loans for Black men was like her version of reparations somehow.
And that was a last minute pandering, as you recall. But to go from a Black freedom movement that calls for a just society and a just economy to opportunity economy, opportunity in the face of justice is like a little stick in the face of a drone. I mean, let's be true to the best of the tradition of the Harriet Tubmans who's here, of Martin King, of Malcolm X. Those are not just names. These are people who gave everything, and they don't have a monopoly on truth. We learn from them, but we also build because they missed some things as well. But when it comes to reducing it down to just opportunity, that's like taking the funk and deodorizing it and sanitizing it and sterilizing it and think that that's a major offer to black men.
Right.
That's true for anybody. That's not true for Italian men. That's not true for Greek men. It's not true for Jewish men. It's not true for Arab men. Let's talk about empowerment of workers, including escalating wages in which people have rights to join unions so they have institutional armors against the greed of the bosses.